As I was preparing a new video on what I thought the future of AI filmmaking might be, based on new platforms, video models, and technology that has all come out recently, and how it all might work together to create a new, unique platform or tool set, somebody kind of made it. Sort of. It's called Martini.Film, and I was able to get early access, so I'm going to go through it. I want to show what limitations that I found, what excites me about potential improvements in the platform. I don't think it's perfect right now, but obviously it's not even public. So I'm not going to try to fault anything that isn't working or that I think needs improvements on. I'm looking at it as an exciting dive into exactly what I planned to originally talk about before I had access to this, which was the merging of all these different technologies that, if they came together, could form really the ultimate filmmaker platform. So I'm going to leave a chapter marker down below. So if you want to skip to Martini right away, you can go to that. But before that, I just want to give a brief overview on all these different things that I thought, if they came together, could create a really great tool for filmmakers and storytellers that wish to utilize AI in their tool set. I think anybody watching this is probably familiar with the major video models: Runway, Sora 2, VO, Kling, and of course Seedance 2.0, which recently exploded on the internet, raising the bar of quality and handling of physics. But even video projects that I've seen with Seedance fail at the same thing that every other video model fails at, and that's when you start to string them all together to try to tell a longer narrative, you don't have the consistency of environment. The backgrounds are always changing, and that's improving every time a new update releases. But by nature of how each frame and image is created, just panning the camera over again is going to create a whole new background environment that never really seems to quite match up to the previous shot. So what's a way to resolve that? Well, you have to kind of think of it as a real world film set, or a set that you build in Unreal Engine or Blender or any 3D modeling software. And of course you could say, well, real world filmmaking exists, Unreal Engine exists, and these are solved, so why not just use those? And the answer is yes, absolutely, very much use those. And for me, real world filmmaking will never be replaced. And as someone trying to learn more about virtual production, that as well opens up so many possibilities to tell stories. But the idea that the evolution of filmmaking stops there and ignoring all these other great AI video tools that are coming out leaves so much on the table. So if we could take the elements from the real world, from virtual production, and improve on what's developing in AI, and if there was a way for you to lock in what the environment your scene is taking place in, and then that becomes the reference on every frame, no matter where the camera is placed, then you can solve the inconsistent background issue. And here's the thing, the technology to do that exists. They're called world models, and the two major platforms doing it right now are Google Genie 3 and Lingbot World. These generate a 360-degree environment that allows you to control it almost like a video game, essentially then allowing you to place the camera wherever you want, acting more like a director. So when you have your quality and physics solved by the video models, and you have your set design locked in by world models, the last thing that needs to be solved is character control. For that, there's a few options that have emerged, things like Kling Motion Control, Wand to Animate, Luma Labs, Runway Act 1. These are things where you can capture, with as little as a cell phone video, human performance, and utilize it basically as motion capture. For more manual control, there are AI rigging and animation software like Cascador, which is AI-assisted keyframe animation for rigged models. And another one I'll toss out there is Wonder Unit Storyboarder. And while this isn't AI, it is a solid example of having access to rigged models that you can reposition as needed to create reference images. And the last thing I'll mention is VR or AR, which would just allow you to step into that environment and control it a little bit more than using a keyboard and mouse. That you would have a little bit more personal control and feel like you're actually on that set or in that environment, and you could get those perspectives. You could move that virtual camera around into the position that you wanted to. But I really think that the point I wanted to make in the video I was working on before is that all these technologies can come together to create a platform that transcends working off of a laptop, and that you actually go into an environment as a Trekkie, more like a holodeck, to shoot your film on a true virtual set with VR or AR and all these other tools that can come together that really would be a legitimate game changer in AI or virtual filmmaking or whatever term you want to put on it. And that brings us to Martini. So, what can you do with Martini? Well, you can create images and video just like you can in a lot of other platforms. It has all the major models involved, so when you're making video or photos, you can use those. But the big draw to this that excited me was the implementation of the 3D set. So I'm just going to click on here and show you. Takes a second to load, but what you can see right away is you have a 3D set where you can move around, okay, based off of the input image, and it gives you two character reference meshes. Now, it's kind of general controls, WASD to move, so you can dolly in, dolly out, well, opposite of what I just did. You can truck left, you can truck right. You can also use Z and C to cant the camera, so you can cant. R is to reset. And you can use the middle mouse button as well to move around. So it gives you an option here also to change the lens. 18 millimeter, 24 millimeter, 35, 50, 85, and 135. And if we just zoom all the way out, you can see that it has created this entire room all the way to 180 degree on the opposite side, 360 all around, but it's filled everything out. So in theory, you can place the camera anywhere within this room, and what it does is create a reference frame that it then exports directly to, I believe it uses Nano Banana, and somehow uses the information from the reference frame to your output frame to create the consistency of the characters and the environment. Now, resetting here, you may notice, or you may have noticed, if we look over here on the wall, and we just move over here a little bit, you can see there was some sort of glitch that happened, I guess maybe when this world model was building out, it duplicated this wall and put it right next to each other. And so if we click out, you can see clearly that in the reference image, it's not like that. And when we go back in, you see the duplicated. And curiously, when you come over to the output frames, these top ones are ones that were already there for the demo. But if we look at this one, you can see that the background has that same duplicate decor. So when I saw that, even though it's a glitch in that world model or the 3D set, I saw it as a little bit promising because it was accurately reflecting what that 3D environment was. So while maybe it's not necessarily in your input reference image, if you have a quality world model enough to where the details stand out in the backgrounds and in the environment, then that bodes well for your output image of having that consistency that I was talking about and that I would hope for. The problem is, if we jump back here into the world model, and I don't even know if really I can call it a world model in the same sense of Google Genie or Lingbot, because I'll show you. If we go back to, let's say we want the camera in this back room here. Okay, so I've moved the camera over and now we're facing into that back room over there. And as you can see, it doesn't render anything beyond that. And I think it's just because it's using whatever model to generate that 3D environment of that particular room. It's not acting as a world model in the sense of how Google Genie or Lingbot would. So it's not going to continuously add all those extra details in. So if I move back into the closet and look out at the characters, the issue with that sort of becomes a little bit more apparent in that you can't really tell what this is on the left side or the right side, or at least the AI would not be able to tell what it is. The same for if you come out here and you go out this window. And so I did just that to test it. That was these two images. So this one, I was in the little back room. And as you'll see, this one kind of lost it entirely. It has this duplicate back here, but where it put this shelf, this was the wall. This is where the fuzzy wall that was just looked like mush over there was. So it has the characters looking at each other, but it didn't really keep inconsistency with the world. And I think it's because a lot of it was blurred out. And so when you created that reference frame from it, it didn't know what to do with all that, so it just filled it in. Now this one came out much better with the environment. There's still the glitch of the duplicate wall decor, but that's in the 3D model, so I'm not going to fault it for doing that because it's referencing what was there correctly. So it actually is succeeding in being accurate to what that model was of the room. Where I placed the camera was just outside of the glass. And so this is supposed to be the frame of the window, and it really didn't pick up what that was. You kind of get the sense that you're maybe behind glass, but with these lines, it's not really anything. So I'm not going to fault it for any of this because obviously it's not even released to the public yet. But as we see all the time, things move fast. And so I think just seeing this is very promising. So looking at the overall set here, we see that it is good quality, pretty good quality, enough to where you can make out everything that's in here by the details. You know, especially what was created that wasn't in the original reference image. When you move over here, you can tell stool, plates on the wall, pictures on the wall. But this project was set up as a demo from Martini, and as any site would do, it's going to give you probably the best first impression that it possibly can. So I feel like everything about this is set up to be easiest on the model and on the creation as possible. So the question is, when you put your own image in, how does it fare? So I created this image in Nano Banana. It is a lady who obviously hates her job, or maybe she doesn't hate her job. Maybe she likes it. She just doesn't like when her boss over here with the clipboard is coming up to check off everything that she hasn't done yet. Or maybe she did it. Who knows? But anyway, she looks like she's pretty annoyed, and there is an environment here that specifically is pretty complex. And I wanted something with a lot of details and a lot of things going on because I really wanted to stress test the system and see what it would do with this. Now, there are some basic things. There's a counter that she's leaning on. So you have that flat surface that her character's leaning on. It creates the 3D models of the characters. So hopefully, ideally, it would recognize that and would create that, right? Unfortunately, that's not really the case. and I'm going to go over everything that I found, which is a little bit disappointing. But again, nothing that I really would fault Martini on. This isn't anything that I'm trying to criticize and say it doesn't work, it's no good. I think that seeing all of this actually is exciting and it's promising. Even though some of the generations, in fact, to be fair, all of the generations that I did off of these sets did not turn out. Not a single one of them turned out, as you'll see. But I think we are at the level of Will Smith eating spaghetti version 1 with this type of technology. And as fast as things move, I think that we will see this progress and get better and better and better. And so I just want to show where it's at now and that it's not really usable at this point for something complex like this. Is it usable for something like that diner scene? Certainly, because as we saw in those references, some of those came out really great, especially if you stayed within the angle of the reference image. It's when you kind of go out of that where this starts to break down. And so let me show you that here. But first, I'll just show you how you create the 3D set. So you load in your picture. You can either right click and add an image and generate a new image within Martini, or you can just drag and drop your own in there, which is what I did. Then it's very simple. You just right click and you step into set. You're going to get this settings box here, and you're going to have two options, fast mode and quality mode. I found that both of them actually don't take as long as they say. Fast took maybe about a minute and a half. Quality probably took about 2 to 3 minutes for it to render. So it happens very quickly. You also get your option if you want to include character meshes or you don't. When I was setting this all up originally last night, this was not available. So the very first test I did, I couldn't use the meshes. And that actually turned out pretty good for this test because I was able to then do 3 different versions. So I did a version fast, which if you look right here, that costs 20 credits or olives. I did one with fast and character meshes, which the good thing about the character meshes is it doesn't cost any difference in credits, whether you use it or not. So, and then quality is 45, and you can choose again, yes or no. So what I did was 3 tests. I did fast with no character reference because that's what I had on the first one. I did fast with the character mesh, and then I did quality with the character mesh because I wanted to see what the difference between. Obviously, on the demo we saw that was on the quality mode because it was a pretty high quality environment. So let's jump into the fast mode with no character meshes. As you can see, it still does create a bit of a reference, at least that you can see in the render. And zoomed in 50 millimeter, you can see the quality is not too great, but you can still see what's going on. Now, if you back out to 18 millimeter, it does kind of make the quality a little bit better just because you're backing up a little bit. But one thing that was disappointing to me is that on this side of the counter, I was hoping that it would have been smart enough to put a concession stand back there rather than just extending and having more skating rink floor. Where this breaks down the most is when you start to move around. So when you're on the plane of the reference image, it looks fine. When you start to move it all, that's when things start to break down, especially in your characters here. You know, it's not an actual 3D model that you've placed in there, but it still starts to break down enough to where you question, is the screenshot going to be able to know what that is in reference? And as you can see down here, when I went completely off the plane, let's bring this up, it got all this pretty well. Of course, these, you know, it didn't quite know that these were skates, but it completely lost our character here and replaced it with somebody completely different. Now we're going to jump into fast with the character mesh. And I'm not going to really take too long to talk about, moving around because it's pretty much the same environment as the last one. But what I will say is that having the character meshes made a big difference in the system knowing that somebody was supposed to be there. So the big one on our other test was the reverse angle over the shoulder of the man. As you can see over here, the man is now in the image. He's not just streaks of light. So having the character meshes definitely does improve the reference of that being a person there that's supposed to be there. As far as what's happening in this image, I'm starting to think it's not actually a skating rink, but I don't know. Maybe that's not actually her boss. We're just going to move on from there. This one was interesting because when we didn't have the character models, this is the one under fast mode that actually came out the best because we were pretty much keeping with the same angle and just pushing in. Well, I did the same thing here, but because if you look at the character model, for whatever reason, when it processes, it cuts her legs off. So back here, when it rendered it, it didn't have her legs there either. So she just sort of phases into this rack, which I think just the whole depth and everything really is just off on this. And then jumping into the side angle on this one, we really lose all consistency of environment here. She's on the opposite side of the counter, although it does seem to have the accuracy in the character design. And the last test was the quality mode with the character mesh. And surprisingly, the environment I can tell is a little bit better, but not by leaps and bounds. I think that one of the big issues with this is perspective is off with where they're putting the character models. When we look at this one, where they're over the table, it's pretty accurate to them being over a table. Sure, there's some gaps in where their arms are and all that, but it's close enough to be understandable about what's happening in the scene. Whereas this one, when you compare the reference image where you have a tabletop just the same as the last one had a tabletop, she's leaning on the table and then you click into it and she's more leaning on the skates and she's not over by the table. The table's actually kind of smaller and in the background and he's phasing through the table. It's a little bit disappointing on how it handled that. Now, if we zoom out and we kind of shift the angle over, she kind of moves into position a little bit more. And as you can see, as I'm moving, she kind of floats a little bit, phasing through the set. So they're not really solidly stuck in place. I will say it is interesting, though, that it created this model of tiny arcade machines. But if we orbit around, you can really see the scale of them are off. However, there is a method that they give you to fix that, where you can go in and you can scale up and down using the period and comma. So let's say we scale them down a little bit. So I'm going to take a second and just try to line this up. But one thing that would be nice to add in, Martini, if you happen to watch this video, is a button that will auto-align the character positioning screen with the camera. Okay, so I left that rolling and I'm just probably going to speed it up, but that was pretty difficult to try to line up that camera with the character designer to know exactly where to put her. So what I did here was manually adjust them. I tried to put them in the place of where they were in the reference image. And just to show you the same angles again from before, we have the over the shoulder. Of course, the characters aren't doing what they were in the reference image. It's not even the same character. So that broke down. This one didn't turn out great. She's on the wrong side of the counter. Here we have our shot that is from about the same perspective as the reference image. And again, the skate rack, which is now just a bunch of melted crayons, it looks like, are now shifted in her way. The character, he's pretty close to doing what he was in the reference, but he's now missing the clipboard. She is looks like a different person. So we've also lost a lot of details really in the environment. You don't see the haze in the air and all that. Here's our long angle that we came back from, and again, just completely garbled environment. And really, honestly, it's a little bit disappointing here because this is the quality render that cost double the credits compared to the fast render that didn't even have a mesh in there. Now the character isn't right, but if we look at this environment is much, much closer to the original image than our quality at the best possible settings environment right here. So that is a significant difference in quality. I'll put them up on screen here side by side just so we can look at them. Hi, me from the future here. I wanted to insert this because as I was putting the examples on screen, I realized that this shot here was a little bit tighter of a framing than the other two examples. And so I wanted to come in and fix that just to make things a little bit more consistent. So as I came in and I was trying to frame it up a little bit better, I started thinking about what I had mentioned earlier when her legs were kind of phasing out. And it kind of dawned on me, and I don't know why I didn't think about this earlier, but what was happening was her character mesh was interacting with the mesh of the countertop, which makes perfect sense, and I don't know why I didn't register that. And I think the reason that it didn't register is because it's not super consistent. So there is a mesh there, but if I move her over, she should be phasing through it. Like I can come down here and she does, but where she does that is way down the edge of the counter unless I come over here and then she's back into position. So what I find, and I think I touched on this a little bit, is that the character models are really, really rough references. They are attached to the camera, but they really kind of float around there. So two things is like you do have to really reposition and work to get them into frame, but also while it helps the AI know that there's supposed to be a character there, when I did frame this up into this shot to match this one here, and I rendered it out, what I actually got was this shot, which is essentially the reference input image. Because if we look at the input image here, these two compared, it's the same one, even though what I selected to render out was this framing. And I'll put all three up on screen and just to compare, and I'll see if this one pops back into a different perspective. But I just thought that was worth mentioning because if you're using this as a thing to like really dial in your framing and use it as an improvement over a roll of the dice of trying to use text in your prompt to tell what the framing is, then this doesn't really work. But overall, I think that Martini right now is a great glimpse at to what is in store for the future. Because I think that we're on the cusp of something really changing in the world of filmmaking in general. I don't even want to say AI filmmaking. I think we're on the cusp of something coming out that is going to be another layer of film in general. I know we're never going to replace real humans on a film set. There's just no replacement for working with real talented people on a physical set where you have control over cameras and movements and lighting and everything. There is no substituting that. That is the peak of filmmaking. And over the years, though, there have been other ways that have been developed to make films. It started on location, then it moved into where you were in a studio and they built sets. Then we moved into having the ability to have green screens and digital backgrounds. Then the volume came out where it used Unreal Engine environments that were virtual production. Well, I think we're on the cusp when I'm looking at Martini of actual full on virtual production. And that's the point I was trying to make with the original concept of the video is this VR augmented reality type platform in which you have control over everything in the same way that you do on a physical set, but in a full virtual world. And I think it's a little bit closer to what we see in Unreal Engine. And it's really the concept is like if you could jump into Unreal Engine and shoot your film assisted by all the different AI tools that are out there right now, but separate. The world generators, the character references of Act 1 or Kling Motion Control, and then Seed Dance or Nano Banana or Vio's really high quality environments and texture and realism and the physics. If you can bring all those elements together, then you really create something that is akin to the holodeck, in which you are really making a film in virtual production. And I think that idea and that platform transcends what is currently out there right now with image to video or text to video. Because honestly, this is just image references, image to video, or selecting an image as a reference to create an image through Nano Banana. And so as we see, it's a lot of roll of the dice. But as things like these 3D sets and world models and everything else start coming together like the people at Martini are doing here, then it's going to unlock a whole other path to be able to tell your story. And that's what excites me the most about Martini. Yeah, there's a lot of quirks right now. Yeah, I don't see it being super useful over anything else at the moment. But I think that's going to change very fast. And I think that it's exciting to see what other people will be able to do with this. And if you have access to this and you know of something that I missed or I overlooked in how I was doing my tests, please let me know in the comments. If you had access to something like this, what would you do? Or better yet, what kind of features would you add to a virtual reality film set or an augmented reality film set in the way that I was talking about overall in this video? What kind of features would you have in that? What would you do? What would you like to do? So let me know your thoughts in the comments. I have no idea when my next video is going to be. I kind of just make them on a whim when something really great comes out, some new leap. My last ones were video to video when those were coming out. And since then, there have been so many more advancements. And I just thought this was really cool. I wanted to talk about it. I wanted to share my thought on my dream platform of full-on virtual. And so if there's anybody out there, hey, maybe it's Martini themselves, but if there's anybody out there way smarter than me that knows how to put all this together and make it a reality, please do. And if you do, please send me an invite so that I can use it. And unlimited credits would be great. But anyway, that's the end of the video.